I know I've been on a Divorce Diaries rant for quite a while now, but I just want to take a break to just remind you about this podcast and how I record it. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast everywhere. Seriously. On Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Again, that's anchor.fm to get started, or download the Anchor app.
You are now listening to the Divorce Diaries podcast with your host. Well, that's a secret. No names, ages, or any other identifying characteristics will be used as we protect the young and innocent. You'll be taken on a journey as one man considers getting a divorce or remaining married. The Divorce Diaries daily entries chronicle the decision-making processes in real time as they unfold day by day. He hopes to add a bit of clarity to his sometimes muddled mess of a marriage. Cheating, overspending, sex, sadness, and betrayal are the characteristics of this marriage. Is he making the right choice? Welcome to the Divorce Diaries. Entire seasons are released on Patreon weeks before anywhere else. At Divorce Diaries Podcast Patreon page. Link below in description. Now for today's episode.
I talked to my now ex-brother-in-law last night for maybe a cumulative 2 hours. Got an update on everything that's happening with him in his life, and I'm happy to see him doing well. I typically hadn't led off a lot of my diary entries with something positive, but I'm definitely trying to do more of that, because this is the rebooted Divorce Diaries podcast with your potentially one day possibly divorced man that lives somewhere discreetly. Talking to him, he's been separated for a great many years. Not a great many, but just, longer than you should. Because marriage is a tangled web that is hard to untangle. I remember when I was younger, this dates me and kind of gives a little bit of hint, maybe on my age, I guess, but lots of game, I won't be too specific, but the gaming consoles had cords when I was growing up. So there was always, if you are of somewhat of the same age as me, or you can think of a time when if you worked at a salon and a lot of the products there are corded or something like that, you inevitably run into tangles. And during your daily work of either playing video games or moving the blow dryer and the curling iron or whatever around, you just don't realize it, but you're tangling things up, and that's what marriage is. And when you get to a place where you want to just unplug the controllers and put them in the drawer, you have to take so much time untangling the cables. And it took them some years to untangle their cables. And finally, they are divorced. They haven't been living together, and they just had some virtual mediation session or something, and they signed papers and no one disputed or contested anything, and they're going to I think they're officially divorced as of yesterday, this recording, and they will have the papers in hand from the state within 30 days. And, after all the pain, all the heartache that they both caused each other from time to time, and because I'm not going to throw either of them under the bus, just know that if there's a divorce that's happening or is to be had, both parties had something to do with that. And that kind of leads me to one of my stories. I recorded it angrily in the first bunch of episodes that are likely not public right now, that are just so toxic, with my hate and my anger and my sadness and my pain. That was what was all over every one of my recorded entries from before. But now I'm rebooting and just trying to come at it from a different perspective, one where I know that I was to blame for a lot of our marital problems, along with my wife. Untangling, though, that's the thing. There's so many years of you even before you get married, there's problems. And I think what's frustrating to me is the way that married people talk about the problems that you'll have. It's very tongue-in-cheek, and it's very acknowledging, but it's also very dismissive. It's like, oh yeah, every marriage has got its ups and downs. But, you know, if you just stick with it and you're willing to work through it, you can get through it. That really doesn't capture the gravity and the magnitude of the problems that you'll likely encounter in a marriage in 2021. There are, just think of how angry we all are at each other surrounding politics. Politics is a really difficult thing. Families are falling apart because someone thinks one way about politics and someone else thinks another way about politics. People hate each other. They want to fight. They're literally rioting in the streets. And people can't even objectively look at something in the streets and say, that's a riot. No, I think it's a protest. Regardless of what side you're on, some people can't even agree that this is a riot or this is a protest. We are so far from agreeing on things that if you think of how that might extend to a marriage, that's a real tough pill to swallow. So I don't think we can arbitrarily say things like, oh yeah, marriage has its ups and downs. And as long as you can get through it, or, you know, you just try, and as long as both people want it and you don't give up. No. There's a power struggle in marriages between people. One person will think that they are better than, more superior to, the one with the answer, and the other person will be looked at as the opposite of that thing. And that's really hard. So you have to understand what that looks like. One parent will think in a situation when children are involved that they know best. Gone are the days, if they ever existed, where a father might say, you know, I'm not really sure about the punishment that I gave out, but I think you're probably right. Maybe I came down a little too hard. Well, actually, I'm saying all this now, and I'm like, wow, I've said that before, and I know a lot of fathers who have, so this is a bad example. I remember talking to my sister-in-law about my wife, which I shouldn't have, but it led me to say something about my wife that was telling and provided me a perspective that had obviously been there for a very long time, but I hadn't acknowledged it in such a clear way verbally. My wife and sister-in-law were having some problems, but the problems weren't that bad. But my wife and I were having problems, and something came over me, and my sister-in-law didn't feel that my wife was really listening to her or something like that. I don't remember the exact thing, and it's immaterial. But what I ended up saying to my sister-in-law, I said, you know your sister. And it was almost like I was talking to my sister-in-law and myself at the same time. I said, you know your sister. Have you ever known your sister to ever change her mind about anything? And she started laughing so a little bit uncontrollably for minutes. Enough time for me to think about what it was that I said and if I believed it myself. And I thought about it, and I felt like, yeah, I kind of believe this. Wait a minute. Your sister is also my wife, and I just thought long and hard, and I said it again. I said, have you ever known your sister, and then I threw in my wife. I said, have you ever known your sister, my wife, to ever change her mind about anything? Ever? And I may have said anything after her mind was made up about anything ever. And she laughed again, but obviously it was a much shorter laugh this time. And she said, no. And I said, me neither. Now, I know that a lot of what I said it's coming off like some of my old Angry Rant Divorce Diaries podcast entries when I was just red pill angry as fuck. But I'm just bringing that up as a point of illustration where your cables won't get tangled on your video game controllers of marriage if you go slowly, like I did not. And you just take your time and you see how a person acts and reacts when they're in various situations. Then I would have gotten a chance to see, or at least really feel, the gravity of my wife not changing her mind pretty much ever after she's already made it up. And I think that in some ways, honestly, that was a really attractive quality of my wife. Because I'm like, hey, when she says something, she wants what she wants. And my wife by no means was like this super, super selfish person that was always trying to take only from people or anything like that. She was just a person that knew what she wanted. And when she said, like, no, I want Rocky Road ice cream and or chocolate fudge brownie sundae, I used to think, wow, that's great. I'm glad to know, exactly what my wife wants. That's cool. Whew. Glad I don't need to decide or decipher. When she maybe made a decision about our children, and it was something that, we needed to sort of compromise on, that quality of decisiveness and steadfastness that my wife has, it wasn't the best quality. Not for two people that need to come together for a decision that concerns things that involve both parties, me and my wife. And my wife is not to blame for this. I used to, when my perspective and my paradigm was, I'm just so angry at her. She did this, she did that, she. But now, I don't look at it that way. That was my fault. I didn't take the time to maybe talk with my wife in a gentle way that would have led us to some sort of resolution. I was maybe more of a browbeating communicator. I had a perspective of my way or the highway in how I communicated. And I'll tell you, honestly, that's never how I felt. I never felt like it was my way or the highway. I always felt like I was trying to seek compromise with my wife. But it's weird. Sometimes hearing yourself on a recording, like, you may record home movies and things like that on your iPhone or whatever device you have, and you listen to it because you think you're capturing, your kid doing something cute, your dog doing something that you find, interesting or whatever. But in the video, there's things like background noise. You may hear a fire engine. You may hear your kid crying in the next room because, they were only one at the time. And you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot that. And you were capturing this one thing, but something else was happening in the background. And when I would hear myself on a recording, my voice was really loud. And it felt angry, my voice. I wasn't very warm to talk to, I don't think. I don't think I was the most cheerful person to talk to. I know how I always felt. I know I felt good. I know I felt like I, loved my wife and I wanted good resolution for us. And I was, I felt like I was a good husband that was asking all the right questions. But I gotta be honest, I wasn't really the best husband. I wasn't really the warmest husband in the way that I communicated. And knowing what I know now, I see why my wife may not have wanted to communicate with me, talk with me. She wasn't anxious and looking forward to, oh yeah, I definitely want to talk to my husband. Yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to hear what he has to say. I would love to drop my perspective and do what he would want me to do. I would love that. I would love to co-parent with him. I have to say that was probably really hard for my wife to do, because hearing myself on those home videos when I'm just saying things to my kids or something, and how I'm kind of coming at them verbally, and I'm like, "Oh, I don't like how I sound," and I would say, "Guys, do I always would like that?" And the kids would do a little, sort of an ashamed nod, like, "Yeah, Dad, you sort of sound like that. Yeah, Dad, you sort of this. Yeah, Dad, you that." And I'm like, wow. You know, it's not until you do something like hear a recording or something, or see yourself on film, where you realize that maybe you're not the warm, desirable person to talk to that you think is so easy to talk to, so easy to deal with, so easy to love. And you learn that and you see that and you're like, Jesus, I'm not. I'm pretty tough to talk to. And I know that about me now. I'm tough to talk to. I am a heavy lift. It's great because I know my intentions. That's what makes me feel better about the shitty way that I've been to a lot of people. And I added a lot of tangles into the emotional complexity of me and my wife's relationship. I added a level of stress to her, because was I under stress because of things she did, said, didn't do, didn't say? Yes. She had some culpability and she had some accountability in that, but honestly, at this point now, I could really give a shit about what my wife did or didn't do. The only thing I think about is what I did, what I'm doing, and what I can do now moving forward. And there's a lot of bad blood between us now. And my wife has still done the things that she's done, debt-wise, marriage-wise, affairs, a little bit of manipulation with kids, stuff like that. She's still done those things. But I don't feel I need to go into them as much anymore. I don't think that I need to, because my hands are not clean, and just because someone spit on your face doesn't mean you shoot them in the head. And I think a lot of times I did that. I leveraged things that weren't really a part of anything, you know? Like, I just made things harder. I did not help bad situations become better. Not one bit. I made bad situations worse. That's the type of husband I was.
Wow. That was the Divorce Diaries podcast. The Daily Saga will continue tomorrow. The full season's episodes are on Patreon now. Subscribe for early access. Click the Patreon link in the description. Hopefully, these entries help our anonymous recorder as a form of his own personal therapy. That's his hope and his intention. Will these recordings of life's curveballs lead this family to the best resolution in the end? We'll keep listening. New episodes are released daily on all podcast players, but all episodes are available on Patreon at Divorce Diaries Podcast Patreon page. Until next time,